If you've ever wondered why college basketball feels impossible to bet, it's because most people are betting the story and not necessarily the numbers. Rankings, hype, and last night's score don't pay your pocket, but numbers, timing, and discipline will. In this video, we're going to be breaking down a clear, repeatable framework for betting college basketball the right way. So you know what matters, what doesn't, and how to spot real edges. So if you want fewer guesses and better quality bets, let's get into the video. Before we talk about lines, stats, or systems, you need to understand the type of market college basketball actually is. So, college basketball is what we call a soft market, but it's also one of the most volatile markets in sports. You've got over 350 teams, massive differences in talent, and a public that really only follows the top programs and what they see on TV. So that combination alone makes it almost impossible for sportsbooks to perfectly price every game on every single night. Now, because of that, books rely heavily on opening lines and then let the market correct itself. In simple terms, they hang a number, see how people bet it, and then they adjust from there. So now, if you've ever bet the NBA, college basketball is going to behave similarly in one important way. And it's a great sport to fade the public. So, especially on those high profile games, I should add, the public tends to gravitate toward ranked teams, brand names, and then even recent results. Over my years of betting the sport, I've learned that the chaos people complain about is actually where the opportunity comes from. But that only works if you're prepared. College basketball doesn't reward guessing, it rewards structure, discipline, and a repeatable process that you can commit to. And if you're willing to specialize, whether it's by conference, coaching styles, or matchup types, this market's going to give you plenty of chances to find value. So, if this kind of process based betting content is useful to you, I want you guys to hit that like button. It will help us know what to keep building on. So, once you understand the type of market college basketball is, the next step is usually going to be understanding how to research it. Over the years, I've learned that the three boxes will improve your chances of winning in the long run. And this is going to be also known as your research process. So the first lens is market analysis. And this is where you're looking at line movement, opening versus the closing number, and then how sharp sports books and public books are reacting at the same time. So timing is going to matter here. But this is important. Market analysis only works in games with real betting volume. So if the public isn't involved, there's nothing meaningful to read here. That would lead us to our second lens, which is going to be technical analysis. And this is your data. Think about your power ratings, your efficiency metrics, pace adjusted stats, and even your modeling. This helps remove biases and then gives you a baseline for what the game should look like on paper. The third lens is going to be the fundamental analysis, and this is the context the numbers can't fully capture. We're talking about player quality, coaching, home court, and also some experience. In college basketball, these factors matter a lot because teams are young, they're inconsistent, and they're heavily influenced by coaching and environment. Now, one key thing to understand here is timing. We can't emphasize this enough. Early in the betting cycle, fundamentals and technicals will matter more for the mid to small conference games because they're not public games. Remember that. But for the big name school matchups with a lot of public money, having your technical and fundamental support is going to be crucial, but then you really want the support of the market to improve the confidence of your bets. So before we go any deeper, it's going to be very, very important to understand the different ways that you can actually bet on college basketball, and more importantly, how they behave. So the most common bet type is the point spread. This is the bread and butter of college basketball betting. So you're not just picking who wins, you're betting whether a team can win by a certain margin. Now, one thing to understand here is that late fouling creates a lot of variance in the sport. Games can swing by 6 or 8 points in the final minutes of the game, which is why in college basketball, ranges matter more than exact numbers. Next, we want to talk about totals or the over-unders. These are driven mainly by pace, efficiency, and coaching style. Some teams want to speed up games, others want to grind them down. In my experience, totals are often a little softer than the spreads if you understand how coaches want games played. Next, we're going to move on to money lines. And this is simply betting who wins the game outright. In college basketball, frequent upsets happen, so money lines can be valuable, especially on short underdogs or strong home dogs. But you need to be selective because the price matters a lot here for money line bets. Next is going to be the first and second half bets. They're one of the better edge markets in college basketball. Coaching, preparation, and talent mismatches tend to show up either early or even late in games before the in game adjustments and late game chaos start to take over. Now, the next one will be futures, and we're talking about things like conference tournaments or even the NCAA tournament. These are longer term plays where you're betting on paths, seeding, and matchups and not just raw talent. So, if there's one piece of advice that I can give you after years of betting on this sport, it's this: don't try to master everything at once. Start with one bet type, whether it's spreads, first halves, money lines. That's usually the best place to begin. Get comfortable with how it moves and how it wins, also how it loses, and then you can expand from there and start putting more bet types into your utility belt. So before we go any further than that, we need to talk about the bankroll management because college basketball will punish you faster than almost any sport if you ignore it here, right? There's obviously a massive amount of games. There are games almost every single day, which means more opportunities, but also more chances to make emotional decisions. So if your bankroll slips, even for a week, it shows up in your bankroll fast. So when it comes to growing your bankroll, there are really only three ways to do that. One is going to be passive income, and this is keeping part of your bankroll in a high yield savings account. The second is going to be making deposits, but those should always be responsibly and pre planned. Finally, will be the third and only sustainable way, really, is winning. So, meaning you're betting with an actual edge. That is, I would say, your best case scenario. We do put it third as the third hardest because it is harder than making deposits and it's definitely more harder than passive income. But from a risk standpoint, I've always followed a simple rule. You should never have more than about 5% of your bankroll on a single bet, and your total slate exposure matters and it should never go over 15%. So that leads to betting styles. Some bettors are snipers with fewer plays, stronger opinions, slightly larger bet sizes, and they will have less bankroll issues than the next group, which are going to be volume bettors. And these guys make more plays at smaller sizes. They'll have a small value and they believe in playing every edge. Now, I want to get one thing out there. Neither is necessarily right or wrong, but your bankroll has to match your style. And this is important. The biggest bankroll mistakes in college basketball happen on Saturdays and during tournaments. That's when public money starts to flood in, emotions run high, and people start betting more just because there are more games. So if you are a volume bettor and there are a lot of games, make sure to break your plays into maybe half units or even possibly quarter units. Bankroll rules are universal across all sports, but in college basketball, because of the volume and the variance, they're not optional. It's a requirement. This is where betting kind of stops being about opinions and starts being about numbers. So when I talk about your line, I'm not talking about predicting who's going to win the game. Your line is more of a reference point. It's what you believe the game should be priced at based on your work. So in college basketball, your line is usually built from power ratings, maybe matchup adjustments, coaching, and context. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to see when the market is wrong. So once you have your line, you don't look at it in isolation. You compare it to the opener, the consensus line, what sharper books are dealing with. That comparison will usually tell you whether there's value or if the market already agrees with you. Now, this is where expected value or plus EV comes in. So if your line is better than the market's line, you have positive EV. If it's not, you don't bet. It's just really that simple, right? The next layer will be closing line value or CLV. And this is how you measure whether your process is actually good. See, if you consistently beat the closing number, even when individual bets lose, That's a strong sign that you're doing something right in the long term, which means that you're getting the opening number. You're getting that number correct, right? It's moving in your direction. So all you need is basically a variable that's proven to win, matched with that closing line value, and you're locked and loaded and ready to go. Now, in college basketball specifically, openers are often the best value window. Early in the week or even early in the betting day, the market hasn't fully corrected yet, especially on those lower profile games. So as more money comes in, those edges tend to disappear. Now, a general rule that I followed for years is this: if you have positive EV and you're seeing closing line value, you want to get that bet down sooner rather than later, right? Now, if you have positive EV but no market support, so no closing line value, volume bettors might still make that play, while snipers may start to wait for confirmation. Now, finding your line isn't about being smarter than the market every time. It's just about having a repeatable way to know when the price is wrong and then acting when it is. Now let's talk about market analysis. And this is where a lot of bettors get it wrong, right? Market analysis isn't about blindly fading the public. It's about understanding how money moves and why the line is changing. So in college basketball, there are a few key signals I pay attention to. One is going to be early sharp movement off the opener is one of them. So when a line moves quickly before most people are betting, that usually means sharper money is involved. Next is steam moves, and this is steam moves at lower limit books. They can matter too, but only if you know where the money is coming from. That's the most important one. Now, another thing to watch is the market and how it reacts to those mid major games. Books are often slow to adjust there, especially when the betting volume is light early. So that's where you're going to find some of your signals. Now, where market analysis really shines is in spotting overreactions. The public consistently overvalues ranked teams, TV games, and brand name programs. So if a team has a logo people recognize, they're going to take money, whether the matchup makes sense or it doesn't. Now, blowouts are another big one. When a team loses by 20 or more in their last game, the public tends to assume something is wrong with them. In reality, college basketball is volatile, and one bad night doesn't suddenly change a team's true ability. Now, the key thing to remember is volume, or the key thing to remember about volume is that the market analysis only works when there's enough public money to react to it. So you have to make sure that there is enough volume. And speaking of volume, this slide is going to be all about the public and all about that volume that we talked about, because contrarian betting only works when there's something real to bet against. With that said, the most important thing to understand is this: contrarian betting requires volume. If there isn't public money involved, there's no signal to read. It's that simple. In low volume games like those small schools, maybe it's a midweek slate, maybe it's games that most people aren't necessarily watching, market analysis won't mean much to those games. You can't feed the public in a Siena versus Albany game on a Tuesday night. There's just not enough public money to matter. So in those spots, you should rely almost entirely on fundamentals and technical analysis. Now, in those high volume games, it's a different story. You're talking about ESPN games, maybe it's ranked teams, maybe it's a Saturday slate with 70 different games. That's when public bias starts to show up. That's when market analysis becomes far more reliable, because now you're reacting to how people actually bet and not just how books set numbers. One of the biggest cases of this is going to be March Madness. This is an extreme version of this. It's the most bet tournament of the year. Public volume or public money is at its highest level, and decisions are driven heavily by rankings, seeds, and stupid narratives. Now, that's why historically betting NCAA tournament teams getting less than 50% of spread bets has been profitable. So since 2005, we're almost talking about 20 years here, it's produced over 18 units. That edge doesn't exist because these teams are always better. It exists because the public consistently overreacts when the lights are the brightest. The key takeaway from this: market analysis helps with timing, not truth. It doesn't tell you which team is better. It only tells you when the price is wrong because of public behavior. So I need you to remember that. So if you've ever been burned betting ranked teams or TV games, I need you guys to drop a comment down below. I want to hear what you've noticed over the years. If there's one thing that you need to understand about college basketball, it's this. Fundamentals matter more here than almost any other major sport. That's right. It's going to start with this: talent and player quality. Talent gaps in college basketball are real, ladies and gentlemen, and they're extreme. On one team, you might have NBA level players or guys headed to Europe, and then on the other team, you might have players who won't touch a basketball again after graduation. That gap shows up quickly if you know where to look. And experience is also going to matter as well. Teams built around transfers often take time to gel, so you won't see that immediate success in November. Young teams tend to struggle late in games, especially under pressure, and then depth also matters. So once fouls hit or rotations start to shorten, the drop off from starters to bench can decide the outcome of basketball games. But talent can't be viewed in isolation. That's another note I wanted to leave here. It always has to be filtered through coaching and matchups as well. And speaking of coaching, coaching is massive in college basketball because tournament experience, recruiting, preparation, and in game adjustments, they just all matter. Poor coaching can completely neutralize elite talent, and then great coaching can elevate average talent far beyond what the raw numbers suggest. So just keep that in mind. Next will be those matchups that we talked about, and matchups are where everything kind of comes together, right? It's scheme versus scheme. That matters. Guard play is going to matter, right? Especially at this lower level basketball. Turnovers are going to kill teams at this level. So, how a team handles pressure, zone defenses, switching, or even isolation scorers, this can decide games even before tip off. So, you need to know these things. Next will be pace. That's going to matter too. Some teams want chaos, others want control, and coaching tendencies, they will also tell you whether a team will stick to their identity or maybe make adjustments when things go wrong. And then we have rest, which a lot of bettors underestimate. A tired team shoots worse, turns it over more, and then defends with less energy. So this matters even more for teams with short rotations or teams that play fast. What you really want to track is the rest differential. Not just are they rested, but who has the advantage. The biggest takeaway from these, though, is talent is the foundation, but it's not necessarily the answer by itself. In college basketball, the best bets come from understanding how talent, coaching, and matchups all interact together, not from looking at just one factor alone. Since we're not looking at one factor only, I need you guys to understand after you have the core fundamentals down, this is what you want to layer in next. We're going to start with scheduling spots. College basketball is full of them, right? They got look ahead games, they got sandwich spots, they also have letdowns after big wins. These all matter because these are young teams that you're talking about. Focus and energy aren't always consistent. So, especially during those long seasons, you're going to want to point out these schedule spots as they can give you some tremendous value. Next will be travel. This is another edge people underestimate. Not all travel is equal. Think about it like this: big programs, they can fly and stay in better hotels and have better recovery staff, whereas those smaller programs, they take long bus rides, they stay in cheaper lodging, and they don't have the same budget as those bigger schools. So that's something that you need to keep in the back of your mind. That difference usually shows up in the legs, in the shooting, and then into the defensive effort. So it all kind of comes together. Motivation would be next. It's real in college basketball, but it has to be handled carefully. Rivalries will matter. Conference games, they also matter. And bubble teams play with a little bit of urgency late in the season. Revenge spots can matter as well, but only when they align with talent and matchup. Motivation alone, though, is never just enough. Next, we're going to talk about home court advantage because this is where a lot of bettors get misled. Home court absolutely matters for win probability. Like the crowd, rims, and travel are real advantages, but it's often overvalued against the spread, especially in public games where everyone is piling onto the home team. So home court tends to matter, even more in those mid-major conferences where travel is harder and the environments are more extreme. The tournament environment, that's going to be next, and it's its own animal, right? I don't know if it should be with external factors, but it's a tidbit that I wanted to put in there. You have to remember that there's short rest, multiple games in just very few days, and then it's neutral courts. So this is where your depth and your coaching will become absolutely magnified. You have to put a bigger weight to them when it comes to these tournament environments because of the discipline, and the experience starts to help some of these more experienced teams separate from the competitors. Now, here's the most important part though. Fundamentals only matter if you actually measure them. You need to back test them, track them, assign weights to them, and then blend them with your models. Otherwise, they're just opinions. But for beginners, keep it very simple. Start with talent, coaching, home court, even some guard play. Master those first, and then only then, add some schedule, travel, motivation, and some tournament context as well as you start, seeing some success with those core fundamentals that we talked about. So fundamentals don't replace models or market analysis, just remember that, but they give some good context. And when they're tracked properly, they become one of your biggest edges in college basketball. Now, let's talk about technical analysis, or what most people call modeling. The purpose of modeling isn't to be perfect, it's to just remove the bias. Numbers don't care about rankings, hype, or what happened last night. They give you a neutral starting point. Basketball is one of the simplest sports to handicap technically because of just the sheer volume of possessions. So, with that much volume, efficiency metrics start to stabilize quickly. So, a lot of the signal that you need is already sitting right there in the box score. So for point spreads and money lines, I focus on a few core metrics here. Net rating gives you a quick snapshot of overall strength of a team, so that I would include. Adjusted offense and defensive efficiency tell you how good a team really is on both ends of the floor and how well balanced they are. That's going to be crucial. The four factors of basketball, you just can't go wrong at any level here. You're talking about shooting, turnovers, rebounding, and free throws. Those are the four factors of basketball. They basically make up the game, and it's great to have those. And they basically explain why teams win or lose, not just how much they win in terms of the betting. Tempo or adjusted pace matters because faster games create more possessions, and more possessions mean more variance. Now, we're going to move over to the totals now. So if you're a person who bets on those totals, here is where the focus shifts. Totals are driven by pace and efficiency. So faster teams with efficient offenses will push games over, right? Which means slower teams with stronger defenses drag games under. But there is a tidbit that you need to remember. Teams who run a slow offense but have excellent shooting metrics will have more overs. And teams who run a fast offense but can't hit the broadside of a barn may hit more unders. So don't bet blindly just on pace itself and whether a team runs fast or slow. You want to see if those teams are actually hitting their shots in an efficient way, because that's going to tell you more than just whether they're running fast or slow. Now, one mistake bettors make is treating models like a crystal ball, and that's not what they're there for. I need you guys to remember that models exist just to remove bias. No more, no less. The best way to use technical analysis is to combine it with fundamentals and market context. So let the numbers tell you where to look, and then use coaching, matchups, and situation to decide whether the bet actually makes sense. All right, so let's move on to the remaining bet types for your technical analysis or your modeling. And the first concept here is going to be the first and second half betting. So if you're betting halves, you can't use full game stats. I know that sounds obvious, but most people do it anyway. You need to break totals, spreads, and money lines, whatever the bet type that you have in mind for halves. And I need you to split those into half splits. So you want numbers that are half splits. So some teams start fast, some teams fade, others adjust well at halftime. If the stat doesn't match the bet type, it's misleading. So I need you guys to match the half betting with the half splits, and they need to correlate with the bet type. So you need to go back one slide, figure those out and find the half splits for those. Next is going to be futures, and they work in a different way. You're not necessarily betting a game, you're betting who can survive a long tournament. And that's why futures rely more on net rating, conference strength, and balance. Historically, almost every national champion fits a similar profile. About 94% of champions rank in the top 20 offensively and the top 15 defensively. That doesn't guarantee a winner, but it filters out teams that simply don't have that championship level ceiling or balance, I guess I will call it. Talent is also going to matter here too, not just the star driven way. Usually, what you're looking for is balance. Multiple guys who can score consistently, not just one player that's carrying the load for 6 games. Now, here's the most important lesson on this slide, though. You want predictive stats, not outcome stats. And predictive stats do two things. First, they correlate to the bet type that you're making, which we showed you already with these bet types. Second, they go back far enough to match the error that you're handicapping. So if a stat only explains what already happened, it's going to be useless. If it helps explain what's likely to happen next, that's when it becomes valuable. So remember, technical analysis isn't about finding more numbers. It's going to be about finding the right numbers and then using them in the right context. And we feel that these are the best numbers for you and your bet types. So this is where everything we've talked about starts to come together. And we're going to do this with the systems. And systems, not necessarily a shortcut, and it's not a lock. A system is simply a repeatable pattern that shows up over time when certain fundamentals and technical factors line up. So good systems are built, not found on Twitter. They're created in your record keeper by tracking data, identifying patterns, and testing whether those patterns actually hold up. Now, a simple example that we have here is a favorite coming off of a big road blowout loss. And blowout loss we define as 20 points or more. Situationally, that team is usually undervalued the next time out. So the market overreacts to the loss, the narrative turns negative, and the price often moves too far. Now, when you track that situation over time, you can see whether it's real or just noise. In this case, over the last 5 years, that pattern has produced a solid edge. Not because it's magic, but because it reflects how teams and markets tend to behave. As you can see from its results, it has 325 wins, 240 losses, up 55.5 units for your bankroll while giving you a 9.8% return on your investment. But this part is critical. Systems don't tell the future. You need to remember that. They only support it. So if a system triggers but the matchup is bad, or the coach is poor, or the rest situation is ugly, you're still going to be passing on that. So if you want to level up as a bettor, I need you to not copy someone else's system, but build your own. Track your plays, backtest situations, and then let that data will tell you which patterns are actually worth trusting. Remember, again, systems don't make you a winning bettor by themselves, but when they're built correctly, they can become a nice confirmation for a highlighted potential bet. So in college basketball, if you don't have power ratings, you are guessing. And in the long run, you will lose if you're guessing, right? No matter what sport you're betting. Power ratings are simply a numerical way to measure how strong a team actually is. Not how good they looked on TV, not what their record says, how strong they are right now. And I like to do that by combining my research process into one place. So the entire point of power ratings is simple. They allow you to make your own line before the sportsbook does. So at the core, power ratings need to account for a few key inputs. Net rating would be one of them. Strength of schedule, which helps you evaluate non-conference games and compare conference strength across the board. Next would be margin of victory. This plays a role as well. And to some extent, home court advantage adjusted on a team by team basis. We did tell you, though, home court can be a little bit overweighted in college basketball. So just use that loosely. Now, from there, based on my years of experience, I'll layer in the advanced stats depending on the bet type. The same ones that we covered in the previous slide with the fundamental and the technical analysis, but this would be more technical analysis. And then would come the fundamentals. And remember, when I said fundamentals, they need numbers or weights attached to them so that they can actually be used. So this is where that work shows up. Fundamentals only matter if they can be measured and then inserted into the model. The key with power ratings is updating them consistently, but not emotionally. You adjust them gradually as new information proves itself over time. And once you have power ratings, every game becomes a comparison. Your line versus the market's line. If there's no difference, there's no bet. That's simple. If there is a difference, though, now you dig deeper. This is what separates betting from opinion. Power ratings don't guarantee wins, but they stop you from lying to yourself. In college basketball, power ratings aren't optional, they are the foundation of everything else. So if you want more videos like this in terms of power ratings, models, and real betting frameworks, consider subscribing to Grandstand Sports Data. That's basically our bread and butter right here on this channel. Now let's get into the college basketball bet selection process. And the most important thing is to understand is this. The process stays the same every single day, regardless of results. Let's start off the day with the late at night or early in the morning. This is when openers start to come out. That's where you should start, identifying potential public games first, those ranked teams, those brand names, those TV games, and then update your research process using both technical and fundamental factors. From that work, you should be asking one simple question. Does my number show an edge versus the market? If it does, you guessed it, you place that bet. Now, midday is going to be about information. This is when you scan for news and injuries and see how the market reacts. You want to compare sharp line movements to your line. And if sharp money is moving toward your number, that's going to be confirmation. This is also when you should be tracking betting splits on public games as well. So don't leave that out. And then in the afternoon, your job is market monitoring, right? You want to watch how lines move as more public money starts to come in. Recheck betting splits on those public games you identified earlier. If an edge still exists, this is when you refine and place remaining bets. But then we're going to get into pregame or pre-tip. This is the final checkpoint, right? You're not creating the new idea here. You're looking for final market confirmation. So if the market still supports your position, especially in public games, that's when you want to place the bet. As for the decision rules, keep them very, very simple, right? Every bet should be positive expected value, so plus EV. No, there's no exceptions to that. Closing line value is preferred, depending on if you're a volume better or a sniper better. But I would say that you would want closing line value more often than you don't. And every bet must fit within your bankroll plan. As long as you can do those three, you should be all set. Now, this is how you stay disciplined. Same process, same steps every day. Results will swing, but your process never should. You might want to save this video because this is the exact daily process that you can reuse all season long when it comes to college basketball. Now, college basketball is one of the most hardest sports to beat, not because you don't know basketball, but because of the obstacles built in to the market and then also the mistakes that bettors consistently make on their own. First, we're going to talk about the sportsbook's edge, though. And this is when books have better information. They get it faster and they control the limits. So sharp money hits these lines very early, and by the time most bettors see them, the best number's already gone. On top of that, college basketball limits are lower than pro sports, so lines move faster and don't need much money to move. That also means that if you do prove to be a winner, they will either cut you off altogether or limit your action. So you have to remember that. Now, let's talk about the traps bettors fall into. The biggest one is betting too many games, especially in college basketball. College basketball has volume, and volume creates temptation. So more bets feel productive, but it usually just means more exposure to bad numbers. Remember, never bet more than 15% of your bankroll on any one slate. Break your units into fractions if you have to, but never, and I mean never, bet more than the 15% of your bankroll on one slate. Another common trap is betting ranked teams. Rankings anchor people, so this is an anchor bias. They make teams feel safer than they actually are, but rankings are backward looking. Remember that. And they're also public driven and often overpriced in the market. So finally, blindly trusting home court advantage will be another one. Home court is real for win probability. We can't say this enough, but it's often baked into the spread, especially in public games. So if you treat it like a blanket edge instead of a variable that changes by team and conference, you're going to be overpaying for it. So here are some more college basketball betting obstacles to look for. We're going to start with the discipline side. Ignoring line shopping is going to be one of the fastest ways to lose long term. Half points matter in college basketball, and consistently taking worse numbers starts to add up fast. So if you're serious about betting, you need multiple sports books and you need to use them right. Next will be abandoning the plan. That's going to be another killer for your bankroll. One bad night, maybe it's one cold streak, or maybe you put way too much on a big televised loss. That's usually when bettors start freelancing and they stop actually following their process and start chasing outcomes. And that's not where I want you to be. Next will be not tracking your bets or record keeping guarantees that you're lying to yourself. You are lying to yourself when you're not tracking. So without tracking, you don't know what actually works, what doesn't work, and where your leaks are coming from. So if it's not written down, it didn't actually happen, and that's something that you need to take care of. Now, let's talk about the analytical traps when it comes to betting on college basketball. And recency bias is going to be the first one. This shows up constantly in college basketball because one hot shooting night, maybe it's one ugly loss, and then the bettors overreact. So small samples feel meaningful, but they usually aren't. Next is going to be confirmation bias, and this is when you fall in love with the side and then only look for information that supports that side. So if you're not actively trying to disprove your own bet or just looking at balance in each side or each side of the bet, you're doing your analysis wrong. Next will be the gambler's fallacy. This shows up when bettors think a team is due because of their recent results. So the market doesn't really care what's due. They only care about what's being priced, and so should you. Now, overvaluing small samples is another thing. This ties all of this together. It's a 3 game stretch doesn't really outweigh a full season of data. And you need to remember that. No matter how loud those 3 games can feel to you, it's still only 3 games. And then finally, so not accepting losing. This is probably one of the biggest ones for any sport. Even elite bettors lose a lot. Okay? Variance is unavoidable. The goal isn't to win every bet, it's to make good bets consistently and then let the math work over time. So if one of these hit a little too close to home and that means that you're basically not alone. I've went through all of these. And that's why the process is going to matter. And if you can control these obstacles, you give yourself a real chance to survive long enough for your edge to start to matter. So college basketball is one of the deepest, fastest evolving betting markets around the world, right? The edge that you have today might not be the edge that you have tomorrow. So you need to consistently continue educating yourself. You want to start with data. I want you guys to start with the analytical sites, right? Like NCAA.com, KenPom.com. He's great in terms of his power ratings. And then basketball reference to understand how these teams actually perform underneath the surface. These sites help you separate efficiency from noise, though. That's probably their main premise. Stay connected to the market too is the next one. Betting communities, discords, even Twitter. This can surface information quickly, but remember that they're tools. They're not answers. Don't follow those idiots who have this play is the mega whale, 5,000. It's the lock of the. Don't go for that shit. You're looking for information and then draw your own conclusions. I would say maybe follow team pages and beat reporters for those injury news, those rotation changes, maybe even some travel context. You want to use handicap sites also, like covers.com, oddshark.com. Sports Betting Dime is another one. And you're doing this to see how the market is thinking, not to copy picks, but just to see how the market is thinking. And then keep learning the sport itself, right? That's always valuable. Read books and listen to podcasts, not just about betting college basketball, but about coaching, leadership, and strategy. The better you understand how this game is played and coached, the better your fundamentals will be. Next, build some technical skills as well. You don't need to be a programmer, but learn some Excel, some R, maybe even some Python. This is going to give you the ability to test ideas instead of guessing, right? That's probably the most important. Data literacy is a long term advantage, so use betting tools wisely. Sites like Sports Odds History that allows you to gather historical odds so that you can back test those systems and factors instead of relying on anecdotes. Remember, we talked about this earlier. The goal isn't to know everything, though. Just remember, because I know you must feel like you're drinking from a fire hydrant, but just remember the goal isn't to know everything. It's to get a little bit better every season because in college basketball, if you're not improving, you're falling behind. So just remember, it's a lot like eating an elephant, just little bites at a time. All right, so that's going to do it for this one. If this breakdown helped you think about college basketball betting in a more structured, disciplined way, I need you guys to hit that like button. It's going to tell us that this kind of educational content is worth continuing. And if you want more videos on building power ratings, finding edges, and avoiding the common betting traps, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next. And then if you have any questions, maybe some disagreements, or want us to go a little bit deeper on any part of this process, drop a comment down below. We read them all. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.